bombshell has shocked the world. DeepSeek R1 matches the capabilities of much costlier American AI models like the popular ChatGPT, but even exceeds it in reasoning capabilities. We have to talk about the implications that this has for so-called US tech domination. DeepSeek R1 demonstrates that China has the ability to innovate despite US economic sanctions and restrictions. Leaders like OpenAI, Google, and Meta melting down at the fact that DeepSeek has been produced at a fraction of the cost of their models. Now, we have to talk about how US sanctions have backfired here. The Biden administration, Trump administration 1.0 have seen US restrictions on chip exports, forcing China to innovate domestically and accelerating its advancements in artificial intelligence and semiconductors. This is what you call shooting yourself in the foot. The semiconductor chips that are so critical to the development of the technology like artificial intelligence, iPhones, computers, etc., have traditionally been the domain of the United States. But by sanctioning China, it forced the economic superpower to go its own way. DeepSeek R1 has already been adopted by top American universities and millions upon millions of ordinary Americans and people around the world. This comes on the heels of what was already an embarrassing backfiring move by the United States, its attempt to ban the popular app TikTok, which led to a massive exodus in the millions of Americans to Xiaohongshu, which has taught those Americans what the real China is like. This incredible development has shocked all of Wall Street. Let's take NVIDIA. After the release of DeepSeek R1, we saw NVIDIA's stock experience a significant drop of 17% with a loss of a whopping $589 billion. Now, investors are concerned about the reduced dependency that the world will have on NVIDIA's GPUs for AI development, as DeepSeek R1 was built with less advanced and more affordable GPUs. The perception now and the widening implications of DeepSeek is that the United States is having a shrinking of technological superiority. NVIDIA's dominance in the AI GPU market now faces huge challenges as China builds competitive AI tools with alternative hardware. One thing that is not being talked about at all is how in the days after DeepSeek was released, there was a hack of its system immediately. DeepSeek R1 was reportedly targeted by a cyber attack shortly after its release. Chinese authorities suspect the attack was aimed to extract proprietary advancements or disrupt operations. China is no stranger to this. Its security corporation, Qihu 360, actually unveiled that in 2011, following the WikiLeaks Vault 1 release of massive documents which showed immense spy capabilities of the CIA, what Qihu 360 found is that in aviation and all tech sectors, the oil sector and personal property data of Chinese people was hacked in by the CIA and stolen for the purposes of disrupting China's development. So security around DeepSeek R1 has now been tightened, and China is enhancing its protections for critical AI infrastructure. There is speculation that this attack could be linked to international competitors, i.e., Silicon Valley, seeking to undermine China's technological rise. You have to understand the trade war between the United States and China led by the United States. It's been a massive failure, with US sanctions aiming at curbing China's trade surplus and manufacturing dominance being completely ineffective. China just announced that it has a trade surplus of a whopping record $1 trillion US, with manufacturing share predicted to rise from 27% in 2024 to 45% by 2030. Of course, this is part of a larger geopolitical struggle that the United States and China find themselves in. The United States has a national security strategy over the past two administrations prior to Donald Trump 2.0, and that is of great power competition, or what the Biden administration called strategic competition. In this so-called competition, a litany of economic measures have been leveled upon China in order to contain its rise. We talked about sanctions, but tariffs are a huge part of this as well. We see Donald Trump institute tariffs all over the place. He's looking at tariffs on Latin America, tariffs on China, tariffs on Russia. Tariffs now are a tax that are levied upon importers. And in 2018, it was found that Donald Trump's initial round of tariffs in his first administration had actually only raised prices on the products that were sold by US corporations and hurt US farmers and other consumers and producers in a massive way. Meanwhile, China has decided that it will respond to tariffs and sanctions and any economic measure of restriction by strengthening its own domestic marketplace. China's technological leap cannot be contained. The United States attempted to sanction the Huawei Corporation, the producer of popular and advanced cell phones. This was a massive disaster as well. The United States ordered the house arrest of Meng Wanzhou, the CFO of Huawei, during Trump's first administration. Now, Huawei is a global juggernaut in ways that the United States cannot even imagine. China's technological leap extends far beyond artificial intelligence and 5G technology. Even the Australian Strategic Policy Institute had to admit that China leads the world in over 80% of the most advanced technologies in development today. Now, the Australian Strategic Policy Institute is no friend of China. It is funded by the Australian government and Department of Defense, the United States government and Department of Defense, and has produced a litany of reports on China's so-called abuses of human rights in places like Xinjiang in an attempt to fuel a Cold War orientation and policy toward China by the United States. And in large part, it has worked. So this DeepSeek R1 phenomenon symbolizes China's ability to counter all of these measures, from the sanctions to the tariffs and more. And it poses a major challenge not just to American tech dominance, but to US dominance itself. Now, will the US market make adjustments? Will US companies like NVIDIA and OpenAI face increasing pressure from China's cost-effective innovations and seek to innovate themselves? Well, the Trump administration says it is going to give these corporations $500+ billion and deregulate the entire industry so that it can compete with China. But will it work? The answer is likely no, because the United States' economy, regulated or unregulated, is facing a massive crisis. And that crisis has geopolitical ramifications. Since the end of World War II, the United States viewed itself as the economic and military superpower in the world. But over the course of this period, since 1945, the US economy has been shrinking as the US economy deregulates and attempts to boost the profits of its investors and financiers on Wall Street. These financiers actually see investment in innovation as an impediment to their profits. In the United States, corporations and monopolies control the government. In China, the government regulates and controls the corporations. And shockingly so to so many, this actually allows corporations and innovations and developments inside of China economically to flourish, given that these companies have the support of not just their government, but their people. That is why China has been able to grow this massive consumer market of so-called middle-class people of over 300 million. That's why it's been able to alleviate poverty by reducing the overall impoverishment in China from 800 million to zero over the course of just 2 generations. This is going to be a shock to the United States' overall posture towards China. The United States believes that it can control China, that it can defeat China, but we have seen now here that the US has lost to China, and in more ways than one. Because while DeepSeek R1 is showing off the technological advancements that China has been able to produce over the course of the past several years, even if not the last several decades, the problem for the United States is that it is falling behind in all areas of development, technology, and Otherwise, China boasts a $1 trillion trade surplus. The United States does not boast such a surplus. China boasts 47,000 kilometers of high speed rail. The United States has zero high speed rail. China leads the world in afforestation and other renewable technologies, now the largest car producer overall and the largest producer of electric vehicles, and it's not even close. The United States is far behind. This can go on and on and on. This is a list that just doesn't stop. But the question is, why has this occurred? Well, the United States has sold its innovation capacity, its industrial capacity, and its people down the river to the richest of oligarchs. These oligarchs on Wall Street and in the military industrial complex view any kind of investment into innovation as a cost, which they believe should not be supported by the government. Industrial policy is actually not a new thing. While US politicians like Marco Rubio, the new Secretary of State under Trump, like to boast that China has been stealing technology and patents and its industrial policy is unfair, mimicking the words of people like Janet Yellen. The fact of the matter is that the United States went through a huge period of industrial policy during World War II, where it was able to use government funding to boost industry in a time where the economy was in a Great Depression. This led not only to a flourishing military industrial complex that we see the consequences of today, but it also led to a flourishing of all industries, auto manufacturing, rubber manufacturing, and otherwise, which allowed the United States to become an economic superpower and give ordinary people in the main, although many were left out, an opportunity to make higher wages and live a better standard of life. This is what's happening in China right now. China's standard of living has increased dramatically. It was once poorer than Bangladesh just 30 years ago. Now China's per capita GDP is in the high income or reaching a high income level of development. And this has not stopped despite Gordon Chang and others in the anti-China commentariat who are trying to tell us that China is about to collapse every so on years. The point here is that the United States' empire, its oligarchy, its financial and corporate dominant economic system has reached a point where it can no longer compete with the rising power of China. And this means that despite the Trump administration's early signal that he wants to develop a better relationship with China, we better buckle up for increased conflict, increased tariffs, increased economic warfare, and of course, increased military warfare. Because how the United States has responded over the last 15 years to China's rapid economic rise has been to encircle China all along its borders in the South China Sea and the Asia Pacific and otherwise. Marco Rubio, the new Secretary of State, had his first meeting following Trump's inauguration with the anti-China Quadrilateral Security Alliance, which is made up of Japan, made up of the United States, it's made up of Australia, and it's made up of India. And this has been the strategy of the United States for so many years to develop a regional bloc of countries that can surround China, that can cut China off economically, and that can eventually be prepared to wage war against it, whether it's over Taiwan or elsewhere. This strategy is destined to fail. DeepSeek R1 has already shown that China knows how to internally develop in a manner that beats and defeats the attempt to contain it. How will the United States respond to DeepSeek R1, the early hack attack that DeepSeek faced, the plunging of the stock markets, Trump's promise to boost AI development in the United States? All of this is just the tip of the iceberg. What we can expect is a more aggressive posture toward China from here on out. And that means it'll be up to us to tell the warmongers, the neocons, the oligarchs who simply cannot compete with China peacefully, that they will not be able to wage war against China aggressively. Please